let you know that my name is Ajay Summers. And as I said, I'm used to coming to Sand and having a couple hours with people in more of an experiential way. So I took this as a wonderful challenge to just have 35 minutes to have your attention. So I appreciate you giving me your attention, and I appreciate the challenge. I am so grateful to this community and to Zaya and Maurizio and all the wonderful ways that we get to explore and learn in this space. And I feel that the information that I want to share and the experience I would like to share with you all is kind of unique in this way that for myself, my journey of, quote, awakening came about very much through and still through studying embryology and anatomy and physiology and being in the field of something called cranial sacral biodynamics and also something called continual movement. And without going into a big story, my experience is that in studying the motifs of the embryo, the way that we actually develop, I felt like I was cracking God's code. You know, I felt like I became intimate with and privy to the source of the universe, the source of ourselves. And I felt that I was beholden with a very sacred mystery that continues to reveal itself. And what I noticed is that even though we all came through a mother and a father and we were all once embryos, and even if you have children yourself and maybe you studied some of the process, or maybe if you took biology or something of that nature, I think what's happened is that the information is very much missing and lacking the view that we're a miracle. You know, the information has become sort of dry. And I think that what happens is that in our culture, many of us are bereft of our sense of belonging because we don't know where we came from. We don't have the conscious memory of our origin story. Or if we do, maybe there was a fair amount of trauma involved, and it's something that we've blocked out. For many of us, just ancestrally, because of where we are in evolution, unfortunately that's the case. We come from ancestors who didn't necessarily know how to celebrate and bring forth new life, how to truly see a new little being and praise and celebrate our existence. And so for a lot of us, we've blocked off where we came from. And what I'd like to do today is just take us on a little creation cosmology story from my view. Where we came from is actually a love story. And the original template or blueprint of the Creator's design, when we become privy to this in the way that I feel has become very dear to my heart, it's its own kind of awakening. And so I would like to just share a little bit of this story and then take you all through an experiential process just in our chairs, just so that we can start to come a bit into the terrain and it's not just head stuff, but we can actually start to feel it a bit in our bodies and maybe remember some of this story for ourselves. So does that sound like a good time? Yeah, worthy of our attention? I was gonna make slides and it just feels like another level of being removed. So I'm gonna be with you all in the way that I teach in my living room, where I'd like to be with you in a way that's just very intimate. So I'm gonna show you these pictures and then I'll just pass them around. So this is a picture of what's sometimes known as the Eye of God from the Hubble spacecraft. Anybody seen this picture? So to me, this is a symbol of the portal of which we came through. So if we think back to what's sometimes called the void, or the undifferentiated pure potential, before we entered into what we call polarity pairs on planet Earth, I remember this place. And I think many of us who come to this conference remember this place. And we're in a process of how to embody that memory here on planet Earth, where we play in duality. So let's just say we all came from this undifferentiated, non-dual, pure space of potential. And to enter into planet Gaia, biological consciousness, we enter through the sperm and the ovum, which to me are very much a motif of this plane of polarity or duality. We have Shiva and Shakti, we have dark and light, we have this and that. We have all these holy duality pairs that we seem to learn and grow and reference ourselves to re-remember that space of unity. But we all go through this portal, yes? And for that to happen, one of our first codes, if you will, that I really see throughout the embryonic process and actually ongoing throughout life is we have to die to what we were to allow an emergence or becoming of what we are. So that little sperm and ovum sperm had to give up its tail, the ovum had to receive the DNA, the chromosomes of the sperm. They both had to go into a transmutation process, sometimes called embryogenesis. And what we start to see is this movement of the cells dividing and subdividing and subdividing, sometimes called mitosis. And then we have this little drop of mostly water called a blastocyst. And what I find interesting is this looks a lot like, we say, as above, so below. So this is essentially a protoplasmic liquid crystalline, a little bit of crystalline structure, so a little bit of earth, mostly water, a little bit of electrical current. So we start to see the elements at play. And this little blastocyst is just happily exchanging DNA and chromosomes and becoming, in this process of becoming, subdividing, dividing, subdividing. And out of nowhere, about 2 weeks into this process, this amazing event occurs, and we still don't really know how this happens or why this happens. We just know that it happens. And essentially this bioelectric tone of energy rises up through that blastocyst and then descends down and begins to form a movement, a sort of rippling movement that goes through that liquid protoplasmic goodness. And it starts to basically create an organizing midline. So we have a front, we have a back, we have an up, we have a down, we have a right and left. We have what's called radial motion or axial motion. We start to have an orientation. Now for this event to occur, we know that implantation already occurred. We already found some roots of belonging. This little, precious little protoplasmic space of potentiality already nuzzled into the uterine wall, was already on some level accepted and received by a very complex chemical process that we won't go into. So what happens next after we found our roots is we start to grow this line. Now, as a cranial sacral therapist, I've had my hands on this for 25 years. And what's going on in the line of this energy is this dynamically still potency or vitality or aliveness that is from this space continuing to inform the development of our brain, our heart, our gut, and actually continues to inform, in a way, later on in life becomes the forces of our destiny, the evolution of our consciousness. It's still happening right now in each of you, this dynamically still, radiant space. It's sometimes called the finger of God or primitive streak. Now out of this, about a week later, we already have a primitive brain, a primitive notochord, a primitive heart, a primitive liver. Can you all see these pictures okay? And one of the really interesting codes is that we develop by virtue of our form following our function. So the embryo doesn't decide, I want to have a kneecap, so I'm going to grow a kneecap. It comes out of the functionality for movement to take place so that we can have a bending action. The first organ that develops for us is actually our blood. And the blood is a circulation process, yes? And the heart came along because we needed to have a source spring for that blood to turn around and circulate. So again, the form of the heart arose out of the functionality of the blood. For me, I find this incredibly beautiful. I don't know, it just lands, it's like, wow. And the heartbeat itself, similar to the primitive streak, we don't actually know where that came from. We don't know what starts the beat of the heart. We know that these little blood islands that start forming and these little pacemaker cells that begin to do their little heartbeat dance starts to happen at a certain point, almost like a crescendo or what's the word? An event horizon. And essentially what's happening in this development from this primitive streak midline space is that we're engaged in a movement, a breathing movement in which we curl in, there's a deep involution, and then there's this kind of expansion or evolutionary movement. This breathing that's happening from that central core space. Now, that movement is informing the potency to go in and develop the brain and develop the heart and develop the gut, which are the three main spaces in which we experience as portals of perception, in which we get to touch the world and perceive being in a body, being here. So the intelligence of this design clearly prioritized, right, through this movement pattern. Now that movement pattern, as a craniosacral therapist, again, is something we can palpate. We call it the craniosacral rhythm. You can actually touch someone and you can still feel this breathing motion that's deeper than our lung breath. It's actually happening from inside the core. So about a week later, we start to see this precious little, still mostly fluid, about 99% fluid. But you start to see the organization of what we call a human being. This picture is when we are fully developed, all of our parts are present. And I love this picture in that I think of it as the ultimate motif of our wholeness. And that we all came from this relationship of growing inside of a mother who's growing inside of a larger field we call planet Gaia, who's inside of a larger field we call the universe. We didn't grow in isolation. We grew in a symbiotic relationship from the beginning. We grew with our mother's heartbeat and breath.
How old would the fetus be when it's all built?
This is 56 days. So I love this picture in that it seems as though we're, it's the flower of life floating in the stars and the universe. So eventually, we go through the process of birth, and that's a whole other story we're not going to get into today. But this field that I'm describing through the midline, through the primitive streak, through this process of development as adult human beings, essentially, our heart is the conductor and our core central channel is the conductor of this entire symphony that's physiological and metabolic and spiritual and emotional and mental and all the beautiful things we call being human. This is sometimes known as a torus. So that initial field of that ascending and then descending current becomes a toroidal field. So what I want to explore with all of you is how we can still access this original template of this intelligence today, just sitting in our chairs. This toroidal field is still taking place. And what I've learned from studying the embryo and studying humans is that I feel that our best design, our most healthy, coherent, alive, integrated, connected design is when the root of our body, our pelvis, is open and available to actually receive energies from the earth, the magnetic field from the earth, and allow that as information to travel through us, And also that the crown of our top of our beings is also available, where we can receive what we could call cosmic information, or information from above. And it seems to me that the heart is the relay station, where from above and below come together and land in us as our experience of truth, our most unique human in the moment, present time experience of what's honestly here. And so over time, a practice came to me, which we don't have time to fully go into today. But I want to give you a little taste, just to show you how simple it can be. That just in our chairs, say you're at your desk at work, or you're driving in your car, anytime, we can drop into this space. I would say nowadays we call this flow state. Everybody familiar with flow state? It's kind of the vernacular of what I'm speaking of in our current zeitgeist. And we can tap back into that original embryonic intelligence of our original wholeness. So, I don't know where my time is, but it's perfect. It's the perfect time.
14 minutes.
Perfect. So, if you want to join me, I would suggest sitting in your seat in a way where you can actually feel your sit bones. So maybe coming to the edge of your seat a little bit. So if you wiggle around in there a little bit, you can actually feel the points of your sit bones. And you can close your eyes. I'm just going to guide you for about 10 minutes. Let your feet rest on the floor with your legs uncrossed. And go ahead and just press those points again into your seat and squeeze your root a little bit. Sometimes we call this a Kegel exercise, or in yoga we call it Mula Bandha. You just gently squeeze at your root. And let that bring your attention down into your perineum, into your pelvis, into your seat. And let yourself just take a deep breath. And as you exhale, let your weight drop. Allow any gripping or holding to just soften out your out-breath. And as you inhale, again, just filling your pelvic bowl, filling your sits bones, dropping your energy there, activating, awakening your seat. So what I want to suggest is that we start to allow a little bit of that original breathing, that slightly curling in, slight expansion, so we can remember this core movement motif. So as you take your next in-breath, go ahead and just let the belly expand. And as you exhale, allow the belly to come in towards your spine and a subtle little arching in your lower back. Exhaling and emptying. And as you inhale, allowing the belly to expand, subtle expansion through the heart, subtle arching in the back, and then just allowing this exhaling, this subtle curling in. Exhaling, letting go, emptying. Breathing in again, and as generous as you would like to be, just exploring your attention down into your pelvis, into your root. And exhaling, letting the head naturally bow towards the heart, curling inward. And as you breathe in, allowing the spine to start to unfurl, allowing the head to slightly rock back. And exhaling again, and just falling, bowing towards the heart. You can check in every now and then with a little squeezing at the root, just continuing to drop yourself down. And if for you, those of you who are kind of more visual, imagine a root system from your pelvis just starting to drop down, like roots of a tree, just dropping through the floorboards and finding your way into the earth below. So you're also accessing the space below your body. And just very instinctively feeling your way down into a kind of a sweet spot with Mother Gaia, just saying hello. Continuing to bring in these deep, generous breaths, and you can even extend them beyond your pelvis, down into that root system, offering your presence. And as you breathe in, if you like, you can breathe in through that root system and receive from below, and inviting that earth energy into your pelvis, into your belly. And just start to notice as we bring our attention to more of a sense of foundation. Notice how your spine might gently just start to get a little bit more elongated. Notice if that wants to happen, almost like the trunk of the tree starts to expand upward. And if you like, let's just start to allow a little spiraling, a little undulation through the center part of the body. You might even just touch your umbilical area, your navel. Letting the breath start to rise up from the pelvis, from the perineum, and now starting to come a little higher. And the idea here is we're allowing this strong foundation to bring freedom, just natural freedom in through the core of the body. So just exploring this in your own way. Just following where there's pleasure and natural curiosity. And allowing that energy to gently rise up. And I invite you to just take these very subtle cues of allowing your shoulders to drop back, your chin to slightly drop forward, to allow your tongue to touch into your palate. So the tip of your tongue, just exploring, massaging a little bit into your palate, the roof of the mouth. And then just let your attention expand a little bit beyond the crown of your head. You can even touch your crown for a moment, just accessing that space. And go ahead and just relax here for a moment, feeling that root system, feeling the pelvis open. Most likely, you'll start to feel more space for the heart to just relax, to be here. So just checking in with these very simple little anchor points. You can squeeze your perineum, grounding yourself down into that root system. Check in with your navel. You can bring a little touch there. See if there's some fluidity, some wave motion through your core. Invite that all the way up into your shoulders. Let your shoulders drop back. Subtle allowing of the chin to drop, tongue to the palate, and let your energy extend beyond your head. So those are sort of the anchor points. And we'll just take a few breaths, just being here, receptive, open, listening. Allowing yourself to enjoy the intimacy with your own subtle core, your own essential beingness that most naturally abides tangibly in this subtle core space from your root to your crown. Letting each breath be a gentle way of just saying yes to receiving the miracle blessing of yourself. Receiving the miracle blessing of your own aliveness. So, as we're here in this open, receptive space, I want to bring in one last element, in that in my practice, we work with sounds as frequencies that, in a way, carry our wave of our own essence. And so when we feel the vibration of our own sound, it's a beautiful way to connect even more with this central channel space. So just stay in your practice as you are. And I'm going to offer you a sound that we can all explore together for a moment. And we'll just see what happens. It's kind of an experiment. We'll see how the vibration affects our capacity to touch in with this central space. So this sound is nothing particularly esoteric. It's Gourn, G-O-U-R-N. And imagine your central channel is an instrument. And basically the G, the O, the U, the R, the N are ways of plucking along that instrument from the crown to the root. So don't worry about doing this right. Just as an experiment, do your best. I'll bring the sound into the room so you can feel it, and then we'll just go together and create a little symphony. And often what happens is each of us are allowing our attention to fully rest in our seat. It's like a permission-giving energy field that starts to become stronger in the room. So as you drop in and allow your frequency to be here, it's as if you're inviting everyone else to drop into their frequency and be here. So the Gorn is something like this. Attention to move through those syllables, through your central space. A couple more times. Place your hands somewhere on your midline if it can help you connect even more with the vibration. Rest here for a moment. Just returning to your natural breath. And allowing your attention to just be open, receiving any new sensations. Letting that sound vibration continue to ripple through your tissues. And leaning in with a little curiosity, just breathing into any new sensations of pleasure, openness, warmth, light. New spaces in which you might occupy with deeper awareness. You may even feel the emergence of the heart pulsations of aliveness, movement of the breath. Again, just receiving the blessing of your own mysterious incarnation. That each of you is the blessed daughter or son of your mother, your father, and all of those lines of ancestry. You are at the pinnacle of your evolution, of your ancestral lineage, and that is a gift. So just as much as you like receiving that blessing, the gift of your own incomprehensible miracle of a life. And we'll slowly start to feel our feet on the ground. And maybe wiggle in your chair a little bit. I'm going to bring us back just because we're on that funny thing called the clock that we made up. Thank you so much for coming. If anyone would like a card or to get on my email list, I have that over here. Or if during the conference at any point you feel like you want to talk to me more privately about anything I shared, I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.